What does a level playing field, really look like? Is it about equal opportunity or maybe the same equipment, or is it something deeper about the spirit of competition itself?
Hmm.
Okay, let's try and unpack this because that question, it takes us right into the heart of a really intense debate, one that played out recently in a House Oversight Committee hearing.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we've gathered some material. We've got excerpts from the official committee website. There's an article from The Advocate,
Hmm.
also a pretty colorful satirical blog post about it all,
Okay.
and a YouTube transcript from GOP Oversight. All of them focused on this specific DOGE subcommittee hearing. The title was Unfair Play, Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports.
Right. So our goal here for you listening isn't to get sort of bogged down in all the political back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's really to understand the core arguments, the different perspectives, the factual claims that came up during the hearing.
Yeah, basically give you a clear, concise understanding of what's a pretty complex issue
Yeah.
without, making your head spin.
Exactly. So how did this all get started? Where did it kick off?
Well, the hearing was announced by Subcommittee Chairwoman Green, and right from the get-go, her emphasis was squarely on protecting women's sports
Okay.
and also holding organizations like USA Fencing accountable for their policies on transgender athletes.
Accountability. Okay.
That was definitely a key theme in her opening. But almost immediately, Representative Garcia offered a very different take.
Oh.
Yeah, he raised concerns that the hearing wasn't really about the subcommittee's stated purpose, government efficiency, but more about targeting transgender youth.
Hmm. And he also pointed out, didn't he, that USA Fencing doesn't actually get taxpayer money.
Exactly. No taxpayer funding,
Mm.
which, makes focusing on them and the hearing about government oversight seem a little, unusual maybe.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It does make you wonder about the main driver.
It does. And Garcia also, he highlighted something potentially interesting about Representative Mace.
What was that?
He noted her past sort of pro-LGBTQ plus statements and contrasted them with her more recent focus on transgender issues,
Ah.
specifically mentioning like the number of social media posts she'd made about transgender bathroom access. So it raises questions about, what's behind that shift in focus.
Okay, so right off the bat, we see these really different views on why the hearing was even happening. Interesting. Now let's dig into the actual arguments, the ones presented for keeping men out of women's sports.
Right. The personal testimonies were really central here. Stephanie Turner, a fencer, and Peyton McNabb, a volleyball player.
Okay.
Turner described feeling basically defrauded, she said, by USA Fencing's transgender policy. Felt it undermined fairness.
Defrauded. Wow.
Yeah. She talked about her decision to protest by taking a knee and the consequences she faced probation, feeling unwelcome in the sport she loved.
Hmm.
Her main point was, essentially, she shouldn't have to sacrifice her own participation, her own chance at fairness.
That feeling of being sort of punished for speaking up about fairness, that's powerful.
It is. Mm-hmm. And then McNabb's testimony that centered on a really severe injury she suffered, a concussion.
Oh, wow. How did that happen?
She was hit in the head by a spike from a transgender athlete during a volleyball match. A life-altering injury, she called it. And that experience has turned her into a strong advocate for defining sex-based words clearly in state laws, specifically to protect female athletes.
So a really stark example of how, physical differences can potentially play out in certain sports.
That's exactly the point they're making. Chairwoman Green and also that GOP oversight video we mentioned, they framed the whole issue around needing to protect fair competition,
Right.
prevent potential physical danger to female athletes, and also upholding Title IX. And they mentioned President Trump's executive order on this, too.
Okay. Were there any, broader statistics or reports they used to back this up?
Yeah, a couple of things. They referenced a New York Times Ipsos poll. Apparently, it showed pretty broad agreement, even across political lines. Majorities of Democrats and independents included with the idea of keeping men out of women's sports.
Interesting. Democrats and independents, too.
According to that poll, yes. And they also cited a UN report. It apparently stated that female athletes have lost numerous medal opportunities because of policies allowing males in women's categories. And that report also mentioned examples of injuries.
Okay, so the case for the hearing's premise relied on personal stories, public opinion data, and some international findings. Right, now let's flip the coin. What about the arguments against the whole premise of the hearing and the concerns raised?
Well, Ranking Member Stansbury, in her opening statement, she came out swinging. She basically characterized the hearing as part of a, quote, hateful agenda, targeting transgender lives.
Hateful agenda. Strong words.
Very. She argued it was meant to distract from, what she called the failed policies of the Trump administration and other pressing issues. And she kept hammering the point about the subcommittee's actual jurisdiction, government efficiency, and how this hearing just didn't fit.
Right, that distraction argument again. Seems like that was a major theme for the opposition.
It really was. Representative Garcia echoed that, calling the hearing a misuse of power, designed to demonize LGBTQ plus people. And Fatima Goss-Graves, from the National Women's Law Center, she testified too. She stated that, in her view, transgender women don't pose a threat to women's sports.
Okay.
And argued that, bullying trans kids isn't the way to fix any existing inequities in sports. She also gave examples of harm caused by anti-trans sports fans.
So the counter-arguments were focused heavily on the motivations behind the hearing, the potential harm, and the relevance, besides just the specific issue itself.
Exactly. And Democrats on the committee also voiced concerns about what wasn't being discussed.
Like what?
Things they saw as more urgent health care, the economy, actual government efficiency issues. They specifically brought up potential cuts to Medicaid and how that could impact women's health, for example.
Yeah.
Felt that was where the focus should be.
I see. And what about that satirical blog post you mentioned earlier? How did it fit in?
Yes. Well, it took a very cynical, humorous approach, basically painted the whole hearing as political theater,
Okay.
suggesting the focus on transgender athletes was, kind of a ridiculous diversion from real government problems, lots of talk about exaggerated rhetoric. Its final conclusion was pretty blunt. The hearing achieved, quote, absolutely nothing of substance.
Wow. Sounds like it really captured the tension and the highly charged atmosphere around all this.
It definitely tried to. Now, okay, moving on. Let's get into some of the specific clashes, the real points of contention that came up during the hearing itself.
Right. What were some of the standout moments there?
Well, the exchange between Chairwoman Green and Damon Liffeld, he's the chair of the USA Fencing Board, that got pretty heated.
Oh, yeah. What about?
It was about USA Fencing's policies on trans athletes, obviously, but also about how they define a safe environment in the sport. And interestingly, their process for choosing tournament locations.
How so?
Apparently, considerations like abortion access and LGBTQ plus policies in different states factor into their site selection.
Wait, abortion access as a factor for where to hold fencing tournaments? That seems unexpected.
Yeah, it raised some eyebrows. Liffeld clarified that the transgender policy itself was actually passed before he joined the board. He also mentioned they have a contingent policy, though the details weren't fully fleshed out in what we saw.
Okay.
But then the questioning shifted to his personal blog posts and social media.
His personal stuff in a congressional hearing.
Yep, including posts under a persona named Dorothy, apparently, and some past comments where he'd called parents whiny.
Oof. How did he respond?
He did acknowledge that some of those posts were inappropriate.
So personal online activity became like official congressional fodder. Wow.
It did. And there was also debate about the Ted Stevens Act.
Okay, what's that?
It's an act that sets standards for national sports governing bodies, like USA Fencing. The disagreement seemed to be about whether USA Fencing's transgender policy actually complies with the act's principles. Fair play, equal opportunity.
Ah, so different interpretations of what the law requires in this context.
Exactly. Legal interpretations, personal conduct, both became battlegrounds. And really, throughout the whole thing, what emerged was this fundamental clash over the very meaning of words like fairness, safety, and inclusion. Different witnesses, different committee members just had totally different takes.
Yeah, that seems clear.
And one final point of contention that kept coming up was the actual number of transgender athletes participating in sports compared to how much focus the hearing gave it.
Right. I think we've seen data suggesting the number in college sports, for instance, is actually very small relative to the level of debate.
Precisely. Many people felt the hearing gave maybe disproportionate airtime to what is statistically a relatively small group of individuals.
No.
Which raises questions about the scale versus the spotlight.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've covered the setup, the main arguments flying back and forth, some of those key clashes. As we start to wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways for you listening?
Well, I think the hearing just starkly highlighted this huge divide in how people view the participation of transgender athletes in women's sports. It's clearly a politically charged debate.
No kidding.
Yeah, with really significant implications for both female athletes and transgender athletes. You've got one side emphasizing, safeguarding what they see as fair competition and physical safety for cisgender women, often pointing to biological differences, potential advantages. And then the other side is focused much more on inclusion, fighting discrimination against trans people, and questioning whether there's actually a widespread competitive imbalance.
It really feels like a tangle, doesn't it? No easy answers anywhere.
Absolutely not. And the sources we looked at, from the official record to the satirical blog, they all illustrate just how deeply these views are held, often tied up with broader political and social beliefs.
Yeah.
The hearing itself almost became a stage for these larger cultural arguments to play out.
So this is clearly about way more than just who plays on what team.
Oh, much more. It touches on really fundamental cogents: identity, fairness, safety, the role of government, even in areas that don't get direct federal cash, like USA fencing.
Right. Okay, so as you, our listener, are processing all this,
Right.
what's a final thought we can leave you with to chew on?
Maybe this. Considering all the arguments we've heard about today, what do you believe really makes for a truly fair and inclusive environment in sports? And maybe, how should groups like USA Fencing even begin to navigate these incredibly complex issues?
That's a big question.
It is. Or maybe think bigger picture. Beyond just this debate, what wider societal factors do you think make this whole issue around transgender athletes' participation so difficult and contentious? There are so many layers, right? Personal stories, science, law, values, they all crash together here.
Definitely a lot to think about. This has been, well, a really insightful, if maybe sometimes intense, deep dive. We hope it's given you a solid understanding of the different sides of this issue.
Yeah, and maybe encouraged you to keep exploring and thinking critically about it. 'Cause this conversation, it's definitely not over. It's evolving, and staying informed from different perspectives is, well, it's pretty crucial.